Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this morning, we are going to look at Andrew Holness or Mark Golding, who will win the next government election, who is going to win the next general government election. Now, that's something that is very interesting. I'm sure the people's emotions are getting high and they're wondering who is going to win. And I'm sure that you have your favorite because aren't Jamaicans very political? They aren't pro-development. Jamaicans are not pro-development. They are pro winning a government election because that is what gives them excitement. And Jamaicans love excitement. That's why they like watching their sports. And that is what gives us some impetus to live, right? We don't get the impetus by looking at policies and looking at what is happening and to inform ourselves. But we like games, we like matches like that. And that is what it's going to boil down to in terms of who is going to win, not in terms of who is going to develop the country, but who has enough spark to win the elections. Now, I'm looking at some points that Lloyd B. Smith actually wrote in his article in the Jamaica Observer on May 9th, 2025. And the bets are on as to who will win the next general election. Emphasis on who. This is so because both the ruling Jamaica Labour Party, the Jamaica Labour Party and opposition People's National Party are leader-centric. So according to Lloyd B. Smith, both parties are leader-centric, which means that it's all about that. It's not about the prosperity of the people, but it's leader-centric, which means that in the very final analysis, what the country will be experiencing, whether we like it or not, is a presidential type election with Jamaicans going to the polls to mark their X, either in favor of Andrew Holness or Mark Jefferson Golding, even though we do not vote directly for our prime minister, but we are behaving as if this is America and we are voting directly for the president. The problem with this scenario is that why and what in terms of the decision-making process will no doubt take second place as partisan emotions rise high. This, of course, is unfortunate as an election should be primarily about issues and policies as well as matters relating to good governance. Unfortunately now, because we are in the age of social media, people don't look at, these things, right? People are just not reading about the issues and what matters. What they're looking at are hearsay, the sus, the propaganda, the optics, because that's what you see on YouTube. That is what you see on your TikTok, and that is what you gravitate to. So I'm very sometimes surprised at the views I see on some of these videos on YouTube that Jamaicans watch. And you think that you are gaining something from watching those videos when they are saying nothing. But what makes you feel connected is some sensational title and some sensational what you call them thumbnails, right? And it titivates your little brains, your little minds, and then you say, wow, that's a very interesting video, I need to watch it. And you watch it and you get nothing from it, and you leave that video totally uninformed of what is happening and of the real issues. That is what is happening in Jamaica. But that is but let us look at some of the things I would say that would tick in the Jamaica Labour Party's favor, in Andrew Holness's favor. First of all, let us look at the whole matter of crime and violence, which so many people are concerned about, right? Many Jamaicans have lost their lives, and they know of people, family members, friends, colleagues, right, who know someone who has or have lost their lives. So crime, according to the Jamaican statistics, the stats coming from the government, the official stats coming from the government, has trended down significantly. So that would go in Andrew Holness's favor because Jamaicans definitely yearn for the day when they can walk and they can roam around in their country freely and without this heavy amount of fear that pervades the country at the moment. So that is in Andrew Holness's bag. It's good for him. It's good optics. as Lloyd B. Smith suggests for Dr. Andrew Holness. Dr. Andrew Holness also recently obtained his PhD, and he did his PhD in gun trafficking, or the trafficking of arms into the Caribbean countries and Latin America. So that is also very good for him because it shows his stamina. It shows that you have an intelligent prime minister who is Dr. Andrew Holness. I think that whether we like it or not, I'm not suggesting that that is what would have gravitated me towards Andrew Holness, right? A PhD means nothing to me. I think that it is the substance of the PhD that matters, not the title, because many who are getting it nowadays don't deserve it. And not only PhDs, but the bachelors and the masters and all of these things. Many of them do not deserve that title because they really did not work for it. They didn't earn it, but we're in an education system that is market run, market driven. So that is how many come by getting these titles. But for whatever it is, for all intents and purposes, it is Dr. Andrew Holness, and you and I can't take that title away from him. Makes him look important, and Jamaicans love that sort of superficiality. So that is in Andrew Holness's stead. Congratulations to him on having earned that important title. Another thing that we have to look at is the economy. Now, of course, I would disagree with a lot of the official data coming out of Jamaica, but again, people believe it. And it is not what I have to say because I don't have the heavyweight that these officials' data have. So Jamaicans are going to believe what the data coming from the Jamaican government as regards the economy. And we know that Jamaica is being used as as a prop, as a poster child for what economies should be like, according to the IMF and the World Bank, right? They are using us as that sort of exemplar in terms of economic progress, in terms of that we have reduced our debt, right? And I think we are now approaching 68% of GDP or 67, don't know at the moment, but we know that Andrew Holness, during his 9 years of office, his 9 years into governing Jamaica, into the leadership of the party as prime minister, that he has brought the debt down to 68% of GDP. And that is an achievement seen by many Jamaicans. Even though we have not been developed in terms of many things are lacking there. People are telling me about highways and stuff like that. Remember now that these highways are not given to us by Andrew Holness. They are just a part of the development process, and these investors who are going down there, they need these facilities. It's not for you, but at the end of the day, we have to pay for them. We use them too, but we have to pay dearly for them. These horrendous, what do you call it now, debt that we have to pay back, including the tolls that we have to pay. So whether or not you see that as an achievement, that is up to you, right? Whether or not you can afford the tolls, that's not important to you. What is more important to you is that you see highways and you can brag on your friends that, you have these wonderful highways and they look like first world and whatever. At the end of the day, the how you are not much looking at. But at the end of the day, as I'm suggesting, it's not about the substance, it's about the optics, the sus, and about what your eyes see visibly, the superficiality. That is what many Jamaicans are concerned about. So we have to give Andrew Holness a plus for that we have seen the development of a number of road projects, including the projects that he's working on for the ordinary roads, right? Not the main ones, but the back street roads and stuff like that. He's working on remaking, as it were, those roads. So that is another plus. That's another positive for Dr. Andrew Holness. So that would stand in good chance for him to be re-elected as a third term person in office. Now, that would also be historic if Andrew Holness wins a third term in office, because since our 62 years of independence, I think PJ Patterson is the only prime minister that has ever won successively a third term in office, in terms of it has been three successive terms in office. I think that was from 1992 to 2006 when he demitted office. Can you imagine? Never lost all that time he was in office. That's a long time to have been prime minister of one country, right? But he won, right? We're not saying that he used any, you know, unsavory means of winning the election. He won fair and square as far as we know, right? So he won a third term. He won successively 3 terms in office. And Andrew Holness is looking toward also achieving such a feat. So that would put him on the level with PJ Patterson. Would PJ Patterson be happy with Andrew Holness being, on a similar level to him? Well, I'm not sure, right? And who cares? But that would be a very positive optics, a very positive achievement by Dr. Andrew Holness. When we look at the another positive we can look at is the fact that Andrew Holness has also garnered significant amount of international experience. Whether these international experience, whether they have boded well for our country or they have assisted our country in developing is another matter. But he has definitely, developed very important and made important connections with people abroad. We also saw, whether we like it or not, that a few of the members of his government, the ministers of his government that formed his government since he took office, since he became prime minister in 2016, have been recruited by international corporations or agencies or banks, whatever you call them, such as Nigel Clark, who has gone on to the International Monetary Fund, right? So we see where the GLP has really put together. They have this front of being an educated, sophisticated, and people who are filled with a lot of people who we would call, very, they're titled, right? They have all of these important titles of the Dr. Nigel Clarks, that they have been to very prestigious universities. And Andrew Holness just got his PhD from a prestigious university out of North America. So we see where it seems to me that the GLP is serious about education. And that is good, that they're setting the example, the standard for people to educate themselves. And to be fair, in all fairness, and just, give credit where credit is due, that the GLP really has presented themselves as, even if they're not serious, right? They present themselves as serious when they sit in parliament, the way how they dress themselves, the way how they speak, and they present themselves. I think Andrew Holness has done well in projecting a serious image of government and governance. Might not be true, it might not that he's doing a great job in terms of governing, and he's not demonstrating the characteristics of good governance. However, the optics is good, right? And it looks impressive. And we have to give him that credit for doing so. In terms of education, well, he's ramming through the Jamaican teachers, ramming down their throats this whole matter of the Jamaica teaching bill. And that is not a very wonderful thing for many Jamaican teachers, as far as many teachers are concerned, but he seems to be doing all he can, and he's trying to convince them. Yes, I was reading an article in which Dr. Andrew Holness was suggesting that all of the other professions, like be medicine, being a doctor, lawyer, they're all professions. All the other career choices, they're deemed to be a profession, but teaching is not considered to be a profession. And I learned that when I was at Michael Teachers College and we're doing the course on professionalism. Can't remember the name of the course, but it was a course that we did. And I remember Miss Royce Graham, who is now is on the stand, unfortunately is now deceased. She taught us a course on that. And he was the first one that I learned from in our third year of college at Michael Teachers College, that the teaching profession is not considered to be a profession. It is considered to be a vocation, right? And perhaps because that is what they're trying to do now, it's not a profession because it doesn't have all of those certification, and you have to go through these certification boards and all of that stuff. So that is what they're trying to do now in Jamaica to the teaching profession, to professionalize it by having them, get their license and having a body, a council that monitors their performance, right? Their pedagogical performance. So it was Andrew Holness who was suggesting that, all of these years and you're not a profession, so you have to definitely step up to the plate. And don't you want to be a part of that sort of in that good company of having people who are your, your professions or they are professionals like yourself. Now, is that what teaching is all about? Is that what we have come to? And what we see coming out of Jamaica as professionals, right? Do we really have that great professionals, and are they living up to the name of being a being good doctors and being good politicians? Right? What about the politicians? Are they being held to account? Because one of the things we hear coming out of Jamaica in terms of criticizing the teachers who are against the Jamaica Teaching Bill or the Jamaica Teaching Council, whatever they call it, is that teachers don't want to be held accountable. Do the politicians want to be held accountable? Do lawyers in Jamaica want to be held accountable? Are they held accountable? Or do they get away with a lot of criminal deeds? And I'm not suggesting here that you should not have what you call it now, a system that holds teachers accountable for what they do or do not do, but there can be other means of doing that than just having this council. But that is what it is. Andrew Holness is projecting this very interesting scenario in which he's telling the teachers that they need to be a part of an institution. One of the things that you have to give Dr. Andrew Holness his credit for, and you have to commend, well, I wouldn't say commend him, but you have to give him his props for doing so, is the subtle ability to be dictatorial, but not showing it, right? He has a way of convincing you to do something that you don't want to do. And that is what, one of the characteristics of a good leader. Something you might not want to do something, but Andrew Holness has a charm and he has a way of crafting his words and allowing you to think about it that you might think, wow, I need to do it, right? And I think that he's doing a mighty good job of doing that. For example, during the teaching, I think last week was teaching, what do you call it, Teachers Day or Teachers Week, whatever you call it. And he and his team, his ministers, they went to schools and they had this optic of everybody's there teaching with the teachers and they're projecting themselves as they value education. And that is good. And I think he strategically did that, including the Prime Minister himself. Went around the schools. I saw him in a classroom teaching students how to read. And I think that was a ploy. That was a scheme used by him, right, to help the teachers to know that I'm interested in education and I want you to sign that the bill be passed in the Senate for them to have this Jamaica Teaching Bill or this Jamaica Teaching Bill Council. I think that was a strategy. It was very strategic what he did. Very strategic what the Prime Minister did in terms of trying to convince the teachers to accept the bill, right? And as a very important bill to be passed in Jamaica. So props in terms of education, that's good for him. And that if he's able to pass that bill before the general election, I think that will stand him in good, in good standing for Jamaica and the teaching profession. I don't agree with the bill, but I'm suggesting to you, I'm just saying that this is how the public is viewing him. Has nothing to do with me. I don't vote. I don't vote for either of the two parties, but I'm just looking at it in terms of the public optics, how you are viewing it, how the Jamaican public is viewing it, and they might view it as a good policy stance. In terms of the cost of living, I think that is something that he has to work on. I don't think Jamaicans are happy with the cost of living. So Andrew Holness has to work on the cost of living. The cost of living is too high, even though you're suggesting that inflation is low, but inflation cannot be low, and it might be good for the books, but you also have to understand that people look at inflation in terms of what's the price of cornmeal, what's the price of a pound of rice, and how consistent is it, or is it changing every other week they go to the supermarket? Right? So you have to look at that anthropology. You can't just talk about what is on the books, because often what is in theory is not what is in practice. And oftentimes, how many of our professionals, right, whether you're a teacher or you're a nurse or you're a doctor or you're a pharmacist, you say, wow, a lot of what I learned in school is not what I'm really doing on the job. It's much different. What is in theory is often not what is in practice. And even when I was on teaching practice, sometimes the teachers who came to monitor us, they were more looking at what they were seeing on the theory and what they think should be happening in the theory, and not what should be happening in practice. You have to look at what is happening on the ground and to grade the teacher or the teacher in training based on what is happening on the ground, not what is happening in your head of what the classroom should be. And if you should give the same people who are supervising us the same situation, they couldn't handle it. Some of them would have done worse, but they're willing to grade you down and tell you what you should have done and you should not do, when they were just merely or mainly in functioning in theory and not in practice. So that is what Andrew Holness has to look at. I think he needs to look at if he really wants to win the election. If Andrew Holness really wants, if he hungers to win a third term in office and to make that precedent that only PJ Patterson has been able to achieve, then he has to bring down the cost of living. He must do that. He must understand that Jamaicans, that I think is the only thing now in his side, the only thorn in his side, that if he does not correct, he stands a high chance of losing the election. Another thing that he is, probably thorn in his side is the whole matter of the Integrity Commission. I'm not sure if Jamaicans are still convinced that there might not be elements of corruption in his administration, particularly with his statutory declaration, even though they see that that has been already dealt with, but Jamaicans might still think, having so many bank accounts and stuff like that, that there is some level of corruption as far as the PM is concerned. So he will have to convince Jamaicans more, rather than just dealing with the courts, because yes, the courts are also corrupt and Jamaicans know that. So he will have to find, I don't know how he's going to do it, but he will have to find a way of solving and, prettifying himself before the public. So if Andrew Holness can do these things, I think that he stands a great chance of winning. Economy, as the public optics, have been presented, is doing well. According to the IMF and the World Bank, we are the poster child of the Caribbean and Latin America, perhaps of the world, right? So in terms of economics, I think he can give him a tick. Whether you agree or disagree, that is what the people, the experts are saying. The experts are saying that, not me. So you can't now blame me for saying, wow, what are you saying? Because this and that. That is what the experts are saying. And the experts will say that you and I are not experts, so we don't have the capacity to think above the experts. In terms of crime and violence, that is going down dramatically. I think that according to him, if the trends remain the same, that Jamaicans will have fewer than 1,000 murders this year, possibly 800, maybe fewer murders will be had this year, which would be an achievement for Jamaicans, right? But that is what he says. Is that true? In terms of healthcare, I think that is also something that he has to work on. But one of the good things I see that the Chinese are building a new hospital in Western Jamaica. Is that true? I saw it on TikTok. So I'm not sure if what I saw was an AI version, misinformation. Those who are on the ground, please let me know if there is a new hospital being built in Western Jamaica. That would be good. So if Dr. Andrew Holness is building that, and he has also built, some, modern clinics, world-class clinics that I'm seeing. I see I saw one of them on Meet the Mitchells channel where, in which Tammy was taking her mother to one of the clinics there in Kingston, and it looked quite good. And she was also commenting on the excellent service that they rendered at that clinic. So there are little things that he has done in the healthcare sector. However, we're still lacking in terms of facilities, in terms of, and I think as far as hygiene and sanitation are concerned, I think we need to work on that. And so in most hospitals outside, we don't even have what you call them toilet paper. So we have to work on that. The toilets are not clean, right? And we don't have enough beds to actually have, or the patients to have them to keep them, right? So we have a situation in which many of our public hospitals lack sufficient beds. We need ambulances too, right? And the whole matter of emergencies in Jamaica, health emergencies, something that is lacking, something that we have to work on. And I think Andrew Holness needs to be taking that into consideration. So he has some good things. He has done some good things based on what we can see, right? From the superficial lens, right? Now, let us look at Mark Golding, Mark Jefferson Golding, who is the leader of the opposition. Now, one thing before I move on to Mark Golding, Andrew Holness also has to work on the unity in his party, because now I think that there's a lot of power struggles in his party, right? Not only for the leadership of the party, but we see also in the constituencies that there are people who are saying that this should be them and all of that stuff. And those who are retiring, those who are going to replace them, there are some things going on there. There's an element of disunity in that party that he has to work on. Because remember now that the opposition will definitely be looking at that, and they will exploit, which any party will do. They'll weaponize the disunity against the incumbent government. As far as the opposition is concerned, that is Mark Golding. He is the party leader and the de facto opposition leader of the People's National Party. Now, we know that Mark Golding started off on a very weak note, right? First of all, the PNP was not unified in the elections of 2016, and that's why they lost. They had that sort of power struggle in which there were many who were contending at the time, contending for the party leadership, including Dr. Peter Phillips. We also had Lisa Hanna and the people like the likes of the other guy, what's his name again? Forgot his name. The Damon Crawford, right? Damon Crawford, among others, where they were contending for the for the leadership rather, of the People's National Party. Now, we know that, that the GLP won, because the GLP was able to, exploit that sort of disunity seen in the People's National Party, and they won the election. The GLP also won the election in 2020 because of the COVID pandemic, and Andrew Holness really, showcased himself as a responsible prime minister in terms of handling the pandemic. Was he? Well, that's not my thing to answer. Jamaicans felt that he handled the pandemic very well, and hence they gave him another term in office. The PNP also had their internal elections, in which we saw the likes of Mark Jefferson, that's Mark Jefferson Golding, Marky G, winning the election. But shortly after he had won the election, particularly as it was coming closer now to the general election, people are questioning Mark Golding's identity. They're questioning his leadership capacity. But before we get into that, let us look at some of the PNP's strength and their likelihood of winning the next government election. As I'm suggesting, Mark Golding is coming from the elites, right? So he's closer to the Jamaican elites, to the 21 families, than Andrew Holness would. Andrew Holness was not born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Marky G was more born with that spoon. He was more around this from his birth. He was a boy, right? He was born within that circle. He wasn't born in England. He was born in Jamaica, and he was actually a part and is closer to the Jamaican elites than Andrew Holness would be, who is just a convert, as it were. Andrew was a convert into that elite circle, but Mark Golding was born into that sort of elite circle. So that would give him a chance to money, to be closer to finance and the power brokers in the country. And you need money to win, right? And you need money to be able to give out the spoils so you can have the people to vote for you, right? We know how Jamaican politics works. So I don't think that Marky G, Andrew Holness might have a little bit more because he has access to state funds, but I don't think that Marky G is going to be necessarily in great need of financing to finance his campaigns. Mark Golding has emerged also from a man who seemed to have been shy on the political campaign to someone who is very bold now. And I think he has grown into accepting and to understanding his role as a leader. And I think now he has grown and he's now facing the public and he seems to be exhibiting some amount of charm, some amount of charisma with the people. And he's connecting to some degree with the people on his campaign trail, right? So I think that that is good for him. The PNP party also seems to be unified, even though I'm sure that Damon Crawford and the people like the Lisa Hannas, they would have loved that position and perhaps thought that it was that election with Mark Golding perhaps was not fair. There seemed to be that he was selected, even though there was a vote, but it seems like he was the choice of the power brokers within the PNP party. Despite their discomfort and despite the fact that they might have been disappointed with the results of 2020, they are not voicing that sort of discomfort, that sort of disappointment. And they are projecting this unified stature and this unified image that they are supporting their leader, Mark Golding, which is good. That is what parties need. They don't need all this constant infighting because at the end of the day, if you are not unified, the opposition, the other party is going to definitely win, right? So the PNP party is presenting a unified front, a unified image, which is very good for Jamaica. Andrew Holness also seems to be more talking about what the official statistics say and the data and what international corporations are saying about Jamaica. But I think that Mark Golding is trying his best. He might not be able to apply what he's saying if he should win the leadership of the party, the prime minister, if he becomes prime minister. But he is suggesting that we have to also merge scholarship with what is happening on the grounds, right? So I think that is something that I think the people will like Mark Golding for, because he's suggesting that there has to be a balance, that you can't just talk about statistics because people can't eat statistics. They have to live statistics, and the lived statistics are often not synonymous with the theoretical statistics. And that is what we have to understand. So in terms of that, I think that Mark Golding stands as a credible leader and people might vote for him. Mark Golding has, as Lloyd B. Smith suggested, is not coming in with the baggage of a politician. I would not say, as Lloyd B. Smith said in his article, that he is coming in squeaky clean, but Jamaicans are perceiving him as squeaky clean. We have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that people have a history, and Mark Golding has his history. We have to look back at the history of his performance in the private sector, policies that he might have routed for, or rooted for. We also have to look at the people with whom he associated himself. We have to look at these things and look if he had had any corrupt charges against him in the past. But we just tend to look at politics, and if he's not involved in politics, he's clean. It doesn't mean that. The same thing happened to Dr. Nigel Clark and all the others who have come from the private sector. We think that they're coming to us clean, and many times they are not. They are just as corrupt, sometimes even more corrupt than our sitting politicians. Because if you look behind the scenes, the financiers, the financial power brokers are the ones who control the government. So they are the ones who are behind a lot of the corruption that we see in Jamaica. That is what we have to understand. But oftentimes we don't understand that, and we think that they're coming in squeaky clean. But Jamaicans largely are going to perceive Mark Golding, Mark Jefferson Golding, as being clean because he has not been prime minister. So he doesn't have that baggage of, having been, having meddled in corruption, and, he doesn't seem, I should say, to have that image. But is that true? So Jamaicans are going to see him as squeaky clean, right? That is how they're going to perceive him, as being squeaky clean and not someone who is as corrupt as Andrew Holness is, as the allegations that have been hurled at him have made him to be. So that is going to be a prop or a positive tick for Mark Golding. Whether we like it or not, Jamaicans tend to like the elites. We tend to have a positive light. And even though many people are saying that Mark Golding is white and Mark Golding is British, but at the end of the day, we tend to prefer the white man and somebody who is a browning and somebody who has a lighter tone, the likes of Mark Golding. And people who are British, we tend to do that. We love foreigners than we love ourselves. We do. We do that. And that is why one of the reasons for which Jamaicans at the time, and don't say, oh, if I were there, I would have supported Marcus Garvey. You'd have behaved the same way, right? You didn't like Marcus Garvey because Marcus Garvey was dark skinned, right? And no matter how much Marcus Garvey, exhibited the behaviors of the elites in terms of his disposition, in terms of his language, in terms of his demeanor, you still didn't vote for him or would not want to vote for him because he's a blackie, right? That is how you're thinking. So Mark Golding, this, in your eyes, this white British man, right? This whitey, I think Jamaicans also will vote for him because of his color and the class from which he hails. Because even though you hear Jamaicans talking against him, deep down in their hearts, they see him as Massa, and Massa ought to be respected, right? So even though we're hearing a lot of noise in the public about Mark Golding, Jamaicans tend to be hypocritical, and in their own hearts of hearts, they fear him and they have a lot of respect for him out of that fear, right? The fear of the white man. We still have that, what should I say now, that to conquer. Because we still show reverence and deference to the white man. And that is why we're not doing well economically too, because when the IMF and these white people go down there, we don't look at what they're telling us. We show reverence and deference to them, even our leaders. So what much to expect from the ordinary citizen in Jamaica. So Mark Golding has that sort of, flair of being a white man in Jamaica, a white politician, and you want your country to be represented by the likes of Marky G. I don't have any problem with Marky G in terms of his color, because I don't look at color. I look at the content of the person's character. I don't look at their color, but we must understand that we're living in a superficial world in which people look at color. They look at education. They look at a lot of the things that really don't matter, but that is how we are as a people and as a world. Now, Marky G has to work on getting the people to convince them that he is a Jamaican national. That is what that's his greatest stumbling block that he will have to do if he wants to win the election. If he wants to show Jamaicans that he is a credible Yadi, right? He will have to find, I don't know how he's going to do it, but he will have to do that. Of course, he has a huge following. So But for the people that are undecided, because the election will be close, right? I think it's going to be a close election. So if he wants to have the undecided go onto his platform, he will have to convince them that he's Jamaican. I know he's Jamaican, but Jamaicans perhaps who are easily bamboozled by other Jamaicans. Mark Golding, if he also wants to win the election coming up, he will have to definitely show how he's going to put the price of things down, how he's going to reduce the cost of living. And I think he needs to present to us, rather than telling Jamaicans that he can't present policies to us because the other party is going, the government is going to steal his policies. He has to find a way to explicate what he is going to do if he should become prime minister, his policies, and to explain them in such a way that the ordinary man understands. But he also has to tell us how he's going to reduce the cost of living for Jamaicans, right? And I think these are the issues that are at play. Crime and violence, well, he is also opposing the state of emergencies. He also, since he is demanding a credible crime bill from the, or credible crime plan from Andrew Holness, from the Andrew Holness-led regime, I think that he needs to tell us if he should become prime minister, how would he reduce crime and violence apart from the state of emergencies that they have? I think that's the way forward now. And I'm going to present a video on the whole matter of these state of emergencies and what is happening in El Salvador. I think you need to be aware. I think Jamaicans need to be aware of that, right? But if Mark Golding wants to win the election, he has to let us know what other means, what other plans does he have other than what the government is doing for crime reduction. So who do you think will win? Based on my calculations, I think that because, you know, Andrew Holness has been in power for the past 10 years, I think the people of Jamaica might be tired of him now. And I think they might want a new face. You know, I think they might want a new face. I think the only reason why P.J. Patterson won his 3 terms was because there was a prime minister at the time, Edward Secker, that Jamaicans just didn't like. Whether or not this will be repeated with Marky G, because they're saying that he's also a white man and he's British, and give Andrew Holness, based on that, Jamaicans will vote for Andrew Holness, that is yet to be seen. But that could be the situation. If that is going to be the factor in terms of Marky G, the British man, the whatever, the massa from Britain, Andrew Holness could win on that, right? Along with the other things I've suggested. Mark Golding would win or will win if Jamaicans, as I'm suggesting, are tired of Andrew Holness and his team and want some freshness, right? And I think that the PNP party has been in the wilderness for some years, and I think they're hungering. They have this deep hunger to get out, and they're doing everything, you know, they're doing everything in their power to ensure that they defeat Andrew Holness in the election. And I think they stand a good chance of winning. I think the PNP stand a good chance of winning if they are able to ride over the Marky G being a foreigner, right? A British slave driver. If they're able to work over that sort of hurdle, I think that the PNP is going to win the next government election. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe, and to like the videos. The videos can be sent to, you know, as many people on the platform. See you in another one. Ciao.